Hey, you guys ever wonder about footers or legalese or all the stuff that's in the footers? Well, that's the topic for today for Email Never Sleeps. I'm super excited for my guest today. Her name is Aysha Zwain. She is the hat wearer, the many hat wearer at the City National Bank of Florida. But I'm going to let her introduce herself, give her background, and then we're going to jump right into the topic. Aysha, what do you think? Who are you? Tell the audience.
Well, hi. Hello everyone. Excited to be on, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself before we get into the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm a product owner for Salesforce Marketing Cloud at City National Bank of Florida. Very timely because of what's been going on in banking right now. And we are, I want to say I'm hashtag email geek, but also I do email marketing specialist. I'm a developer. I'm also a pseudo architect, and it's multiple hat wear in general. But my favorite stuff is really just seeing how the data moves and how we can personalize it, along with just playing around in Marketing Cloud and all the other ESPs that I used to be on.
Yeah.
And that's really about it.
You are what I call the quintessential marketing technologist, right? You get it, you've been there, you've lived it, you've been agency side. You're sort of that pseudo person that gets, and that's kind of an awesome way to be, right? Rather than just being pigeonholed, especially like me in certain areas. But I want to talk about this this topic of footers and legalese and footers and everything. And I think for the audience out there, I get a lot of email, you get a lot of email. And in some cases, I get that there's the need for legalese, especially if you're talking about financial, fintech or whatever. But I'm looking at even e-commerce, publishing, B2B brands. In some cases, there's this footer that is, well, kind of a lot, right? And it's almost too much. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on having footers and what your experience has been with them, because I think it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, definitely. So I've hopped around several different industries. I think I'm nearing now 10 years being in email, which is a bit younger than some of my friends and mentors, but still older than a lot of my newer crops that I'm teaching or cross-training lately. And I've seen a lot of different things, and coming from e-commerce, sometimes I really do miss it where they hide everything in just quick links and people just click on it. When it comes to the more regulated industries, when it comes to like government, when I worked on government, specifically COVID-19 response programs for vaccines, or also working on either insurance and banking and everything else related to that, is that there is a sense of you need to put the legalese up front and center, as opposed to when it comes to some other like B2C marketing, like real estate, that, well, people expect all that legalese. Let's just put it in a quick like link instead, or anything else like that.
Sure. Do you think though that sometimes people are turned off when, especially if it's a shorter email and the legal is longer than the actual email itself? I mean, there's this level of anxiety. There's also this level of, oh my gosh, should I read this? How important is this? And I'm curious what your thoughts are too.
Well, I will say that, let's say for the credit card companies, I'm going to try to avoid name. I'm going to avoid as much as I can, unless it's like a previous employer that I'm really happy with. So when it comes to the credit card companies or some of the banking places that I am that I work with, or let's say, hey, I'm a client of theirs, what it is that I have two mindsets. I'm thinking that the legal department is so powerful that they have nothing else to do but scrutinize email because either A, they're apprehensive of the technology, or B, they're apprehensive of the lawsuits. Sometimes it could be a little bit of both.
Okay.
Or things like that, where sometimes we overpromise when we shouldn't when marketing.
But honestly, so I've had discussions with legal departments about a long, lengthy legalese in the email.
Yeah.
And the question I always ask is, are we expecting people to read it, or are we just doing it because it's part of a checkbox? And the answer I mostly got was, it's a checkbox, right? We certainly never intend for people to read. It's like reading a T's and C's, right? Or an entire privacy policy on someone's side. You just don't do it, right? You know, and you know, I've looked at eye tracking studies, right? And then you look at a link at the bottom.
I love those.
And it's never, you know, there's no hardly any clicks that happen or engagement that's there. But I'm wondering, do you think the legal department cares about the experience in that email? Or they don't? They just don't.
They generally just don't. Unless they come from a marketing background. A lot of lawyers do have a little bit of a creative background.
Okay.
Not all of them. I feel like it's a very mixed bag, but sometimes I feel like sometimes they do. They're more realistic. It just depends on the kind of representation you end up getting. Sometimes you have like a great, like I remember having a great relationship with a legal rep a few years ago, and I certainly miss it in some of the more recent ones now, where it's kind of almost antagonistic.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty shameless. I'll hunt you down if I can't find you. Yeah, but it's been very interesting in that regard, because it's hard to see what you get, but you can almost always guess well with what you're going to be getting, depending on the kind of company you're working for or client that you have. Like here in my place, everything is very strict and regimented, and you have to go through processes that are never even published or posted, or you're never even cross-trained into.
Right. So, okay. So taking aside banking, credit card, anything financial, I get it. Right?
Yeah.
I get legalese, but let's talk about brands that still put a lot of stuff in as it relates to their sales, right? So let's go to the consumer side for and e-commerce in general, right? I see emails where, you know, they talk about whatever percentage or free shipping or what, you know, whatever the deal of the day is, right? And at the bottom, it's got all this different things in the states that it's legal in and stuff. And that's where I ask myself, is it worth it to put it in the email? Because that's where I think linking would really help. But so I guess my big question is, are you a proponent of having legalese in an email, or are you not? Because I'm not, other than the industries I think that need it. I think it can definitely be served a different purpose, at least in that footer of that email. But
I agree fully. And I think there should be like a 3 to 4 line maximum, even in the regulated industries, because you can just post it on a site and link to it and just speak briefly about it like a tweet. People's attention spans nowadays are so limited. We are rushed and slightly automated in so many different ways, but at the same time, we're still human. We can't automate all the things and still live our lives. So why create more visual clutter to the consumer, to the user?
I've worked with clients before in the past that have had the notion of having a global footer, right? And it was something that they stuck in every single email that they sent out. And then I've also worked with brands who had this sort of pick and choose, right? Almost sort of like, you know, like you go through a drive-through and you pick what sort of footers you want. As a technologist, right? Do you think that can confuse the average email marketer that's going in and from the production side and setting stuff up? Do you believe that a global footer, especially for a large, well-known brand, or even any global brand, is worth having? Because I've seen them all. I've seen all different things. Like, what have you worked on in the past?
All of them. At this point, all of them. I actually really love, to me, it's let's go to the first part. Can it be confusing to the email developer or specialist when they first come in and learn? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And generally there is no documentation, so they're double effed 5 times around.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that, it just depends on what was previously set up, what do they have to learn, and what do they think they have sway for.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on the product and and how large the send volume is and the kinds of emails that they're sending between transactional and marketing, and all those other ones that try to say they're different. Like, oh no, it's a service-based email, when I'm like, look, it has to be marketing or transactional. It can't be that third.
Right.
Yeah.
You showed me sort of your artist like mini studio before.
Yeah.
And that always kind of bleeds into being a creative. Now, I know an area of mine that's a weakness in email is that of the creative side. I know enough to be dangerous, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think the creative person, when we start talking about designing emails, whether it's templates, whether it's one-off emails, do you think they're the lowest person on the pole when it comes to design aspects, because they have to work within this framework of this is what the footer needs to be?
That's a good point. Actually, I really think it's a good point. It can be. But I also have been saying recently a lot more, it's a battle for another day, or it's a battle like I'd rather fight another battle not on the footer and more so towards the top, or what the actual messaging is. What I try to do is try to be as brief as possible, or at least try to sway the powers that be in that footer. There's a few instances where I've lost, like I lost the battle, said about this message. Not every financial institution has that, but I'm like, you know what? I'm working on my favorite platform and I'm calling the shots. So
there you go. Right.
It is what it is. I'll put about this message.
Let's switch the topic of just legalese and just talk about Twitter in general for just a second. Is there any specific absolute no-nos in your book or in your experience that you would never put into a footer?
Or at least try to fight not putting it in there.
Or at least fight, right? Like fight the good fight. What would you do?
Yeah, the Royal Cavalry really wants to not gray out or hide unsubscribe. They would prefer not to. Also, there's also things that feel deceiving to the audience. I can't really think of an example right now beyond hiding the unsubscribe and preferences. Logins, I think, is probably the worst offender related to that. But I can't really think of anything else besides that.
I always try to use stories, or at least I don't want to make a comparison when they say, hey, I want my footer or my, like my unsubscribe to be shaded gray, smaller point font than that of the regular one. And so typically what I would do is, to prove my point, I would actually send them an email and use like a 4-point font in my email to them and saying, this is what the user experience is, right? Hiding that stuff is kind of silly. I'm actually a huge proponent, especially for the publishing industry, around link farms, right? Especially if they've got many different topics for publishing. Having a link farm, and someone say, well, you can have that in the header of the email, but in the footer, if people kind of know and they scroll and you give them, I don't know, a reward, so to speak, to scroll all the way to the bottom of the email and the footer of the email, doing that. I'm also a huge proponent that there are probably some times where having in your footer social icons to be a complete landmine. when it comes to emails, especially if you find out that their social channels haven't been updated in a year, or they've got like 3 posts or 20 followers, and they just do it because it's part of the checkbox, so to speak, right, in email. Aside from those other no-nos, what are a few things that you would absolutely recommend that people do?
Absolutely recommend FAQs. And if, let's say, it's a place of business that has multiple brick and mortar locations, definitely make it easy for them to try to find you, especially if it's a highly localized list, or an audience that likely will go ahead and physically visit you. Make it easy for people to find you on the first go, I think, is probably something that I've really come to appreciate now, as I see things over and over again. Either FAQs or the privacy policy. But when you look at the privacy policy and how they handle your data, like, stupefy it, make it so it's foolproof, and that I can read it to my nephew that is pretty apt at understanding new concepts and things. And he's not in 5th grade, but he's about to be, and might as well,
Yeah. I'd say, I'll add on to that. I agree with FAQs. I agree with a link to a privacy policy. I'll also say is there's a general place for someone to contact you.
Yes.
And whether it's a phone number, whether it's an email address
or landing page,
right? Put it in there, but put it prominently in there, right? Because nothing frustrates, I think, people more than where they're looking and they want an answer, right, to something. And so sometimes people hit reply and then, message filtering and things of that nature. But if they know where to go each and every time, and that's at the bottom, can't tell you, we as marketers know where to go. We know who to contact, but the average subscriber, the person on the other side, right, that's not a marketer, that's not an email marketing, may not know what to do. And sometimes we need to lead people to engage with us. And so, we hear the word personalization, and we've heard this term for years, or individualization, or an experience. And to me, having that information, especially prominent, especially in the same place over and over and over again, is part of that experience, is part of that personalization. And there's room to test all of that stuff. And I've tested a lot of stuff, and there's no quintessential, bluebird, best practice for a footer. So I think that's the important thing. So wrapping up, everybody, Aysha, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. You bring a lot. We'll have all of her information posted on this video. Get a hold of her. She's very active in many communities that I think we all are. Thank you so much for your time again today, Aysha. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all the subscribers of Email Never Sleeps, and look out for some future stuff.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Aysha. Take care.
Bye.